Welcome, everyone, to episode 14 of the Ashen Forge. We are again joined by Sog and, of course, Neuro and Diggs. And as you can see, we have a few things to talk about. Sieges and takeovers. Sieges because we were going to talk about sieges this episode, and takeovers because there's been a whole lot of news in the last week with regards to Daybreak, and then potentially Intrepid coming in to take over the company. So
maybe, possibly.
How's everyone doing?
Great.
Doing good.
I kind of want to start with that because that's like a big deal, and then we'll get to sieges.
Seriously.
So
that's why I wore this shirt in particular.
I obviously have a lot to say about that. I've been doing a lot of stuff throughout the week with digging into documents and things, but I'm curious your guys' opinion on all of this. Obviously, I assume you've been reading the Massively articles and the MMORPG articles. There was even something in Ars Technica today as well. So it's starting to get kind of a broader.
I'll say this. It seemed like a nothing burger until Laura left, and then immediately people start getting laid off like the next day. And then immediately it went from being potentially a nothing burger and just, a clerical error and a lack of due diligence to communicate that stuff to, yes, full on, like, a whirlwind or a blizzard or a combination of the two accepted as feces. And that is what's going on.
Well, so we know what we're talking about. I'm not sure that anybody who hasn't been following the news is aware of what we're talking about.
Good point.
What we are talking about is earlier this week we heard that Daybreak, who was owned by Columbus Nova, which is a Russian company.
No, they weren't. Go ahead.
Well, I'm laying out the way it was laid out, and then we can break it down. But they said they were owned by Columbus Nova originally, which is a Russian company, and Columbus Nova's assets are set. I think it's connected to, collusion with Trump.
It's that fella Victor Wexelberg. Okay. He's the man who's kind of responsible. I believe he's one of the people that's involved in this whole Russian people with money who are also like mafioso warlords or whatever, getting cut off and shut down and told not to operate in the U.S. anymore.
Yeah.
So that's, I believe, what the whole thing is. Now there's this whole thing about, well, it wasn't actually Columbus Nova. It was Jason Epstein and his own holding company, and they're actually the ones that owned it. But
right, he just happened to be a partner with Columbus Nova,
which he left in 2017.
Right.
But even though he left, it seems quite oddly suspicious that his company, Daybreak Games, would be running out of money immediately as all of this, shutdown of the
assets for Columbus Nova. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing for me is that immediately when all of this happened, they attempted to, or are attempting to, rewrite history, and they're acting as if they can't afford to keep operating when they've never been making money. So it really sounds like no longer are they valuable as a money laundering outlet. So they need to find a way to exist as a standalone entity, because a money laundering outlet doesn't need to make money. It can lose all kinds of money because it's just about cleaning the fake money or the illegal money that's passing through. But now it can't be that. And whether or not they can go back and somehow prove that Epstein was the actual owner and in no way were they connected to Renova Group via Columbus Nova, either way, all of the sudden, they can't operate on a losing money operation, which says, we have to stop laundering money through Daybreak Games, and that means that they can't afford to be paying all of these people to be there. And the options are they cut down to the bare minimum and try to keep something alive making no money, or they just close it down or sell it off to somebody else. And I know that's what Phantom X wants to get into eventually.
Yeah. So,
right. And who broke the news first? Was it Kotaku? No, it was MMORPG.com, right?
Well, as far which part? The Intrepid part?
No, just when did it come on your radar?
So EQWire, what's his name? Felden? He kind of stumbled on this article of the Justice Department and Renova, and it mentioned Columbus Nova. And I think he's the one who started it and tipped off Massively Overpowered. They ran the article.
Oh, okay.
Immediately after that, of course, Daybreak said, no, we're not. We don't have Columbus Nova. They didn't buy us. And that's when it got really crazy, because that's when they started taking stuff off their website, removing articles. They went to Wikipedia, tried to change everything within Wikipedia to get rid of it all. And that all got, so that it just sort of blew up from there. And then of course, layoffs, and it just sort of kind of escalated from there.
Right.
And then it was actually the same day that it was later that day when the layoffs hit, where it was MMORPG.com that posted an insider tip that Daybreak was being chopped, which I'd actually been told all that earlier this week, but I couldn't really say anything. So it's not so much to talk about Daybreak. I guess that's not why it's an interesting story, and definitely look up online because there's a lot of weird stuff. So essentially, just to recap everything. So in 2015, it sold. They say Columbus Nova bought us. It's everywhere. There's a press release from Daybreak saying that, with a quote from Epstein himself saying "we" and "us" as in Columbus Nova. And magically for 3 years, no one corrects that. This Massively article hits, and oh no, we don't belong to them. Just so happens that the person I talked to, it's been probably about 2 months, 2 or 3 months ago, that person got tipped off about them wanting to sell, which sort of coincides with the sanctions that were starting to get known. So just so happens they get sanctioned, and then, we want to sell the company. And my understanding is it's been hard to find anyone to buy it. So I actually don't think this whole rush to scrubbing Wikipedia had anything to do with the government or sanctions or laundering. I think it actually had more to do. They're trying to sell the company, and the last thing they want is this big article up anywhere about Russian sanctions and Columbus Nova and somehow being tied to Daybreak. I actually think that's why they started doing all that. But I also think the layoffs are probably somehow tied into that. I hate to see any of them get let off, but I assume that has something to do with trying to improve the finances to see if someone will buy them.
I don't mind them getting laid off because, we've been hearing the rumor that possibly Intrepid Studios is interested in acquiring the company. And even if they don't acquire the company, I mean, they've got probably half of the devs are from Daybreak, so it couldn't hurt to snap up those laid off employees.
I mean,
and add them to Daybreak.
You say that, but
Intrepid.
it does suck to lose your job if you're walking in, if you're settled in, if you've been living in the area for a while. Losing your job means screw it. You gotta change something. That totally sucks. And maybe Intrepid's going to be able to take in everybody that got axed, but. So who knows?
I don't believe in coincidences. I don't. This is. I have no proof of this, and this is not at all. It has the appearance of a source of money is no longer going to be there, so they have to get rid of what they have. And actually a casualty in all this that hasn't really been talked about is it actually in that MMORPG article. It looks like Standing Stone Games, who of course does Lord of the Rings online, actually is in some way or another owned by Daybreak or somehow financially tied to it was in the article.
But that happened a couple years ago.
Well, we knew they were the publisher, right? But I didn't realize they had any financial interest in it beyond being a publisher. It actually looks like it goes much deeper than that. And when I was looking through a lot of the LLC stuff for Daybreak, I looked at the standing stone, and it actually, part of it has a Daybreak address on their LLC formation. So it looks just a lot more deeper than that. So, but there's not been a lot of comment on that. I have no doubt that they've approached Stephen. I think they've probably approached a lot of people, and I equally have no doubt that he's probably sitting back saying, "Hey, he's a gamer like all of us. This is a classic franchise with a lot of classic games, and I bet he's given it serious consideration. I mean, if he has the money to do it, I don't think I would do that if I had the money to. I don't know how you guys feel. But
I don't think that it's a good buy if you're planning to run a legal business. Not that any of the individuals there are not great to have elsewhere, but right now, like on paper, we're talking about a company that doesn't make money. Their newest flagship game, they do have an
H1Z1?
Yeah. But they have an unannounced title that we don't know anything about other than like a couple potential names we've dug up. But H1Z1 has declined terribly, partially due to the rise of Fortnite and partially due to some post-launch changes they made that alienated a lot of their player base. So they're not in a position to be a money-making asset. So this is where I think it makes a lot of sense that if you can acquire that business for nothing and just use it to launder money, like I believe could very well have been done with the last sale, fine. But you're not buying that business saying, I want to throw away millions of dollars to keep EverQuest alive. I don't see that happening.
I just want them to hire the devs. I don't care if they keep EverQuest alive. I'm not playing it. So,
I mean,
yeah,
I totally agree with Sog. I mean, it's like you're a new company. You don't even have. I mean, you have an Alpha Zero, but let's be honest, it's basically a basic MMORPG at this point. You have hype right now. I mean, you have hype in a basic model. You're trying to grow this. Do you really want to take on this entire other company that's losing money, as far as we know, that might have a whole lot of legal issues? We don't know that, but it has the appearance that this could, if somebody decided to look into this, that it could go very poorly. I don't know why you would want to take that on. If it were me, and I hate to say this because, again, the employees get left out of this, but it's like I would, if you're dead set on doing it, just offer to buy the IPs. Just I'll buy the games, the names from you. I'm not going to buy the studio. I don't know if that would free you of any legal potentially problems later on, but at least you don't have the entire studio. You just have the rights to all the games. That would be me. So I guess I hope. I don't know. I don't know what I hope. I hope if they decide to. If they do decide to buy it, that they something positive. I just don't know that anything positive necessarily in the long run comes out of it. It definitely, I feel like it might take away from Ashes just because you're going to have to now spend a lot of time and resources in another place.
But remember that SOE was bought for basically nothing, right? Like it wasn't a traditional like sale. Like it's not like somebody paid a lot of money for it. They found somebody willing to continue to operate the business by funneling money in. They didn't like Twitch was sold to Amazon for $900 million, right? Columbus Nova did not buy Daybreak for X number of $1 million. So, like, that's the kind of thing that they need. They need somebody who has infinitely deep pockets or an illegal venue.
See,
to keep it running.
I saw it a different way because it was to my understanding that at the time of the transaction, one of the terms of it was that they had to reach some degree of financial solvency. From one of the things I had heard, it was that PlanetSide 2 had finally started being in the plus instead of being in the red for the first time ever. I'm not sure, what the exact details are on that, but to be perfectly honest, that would make sense that at that time, where H1Z1 was at, where PlanetSide 2 was at, where everything was at, they could very well have achieved financial solvency or had the path of financial solvency, knowing that in X amount of time they were going to end the landmark project, EverQuest Next for good. And so with all of that, I feel like there might have been a chance that no, it wasn't just like, purchased with fully ill intentions to just be a place for their laundering and swindling to be going on, but in fact that they were actually trying to have a legitimate studio out of it. And between the battle royale craze just taking off and Fortnite battle royale really stomping everybody, but on top of that, things might have been a peak at that moment, but either mismanagement or otherwise, they didn't continue to improve, and I feel like that might be part of the reason why they're looking like they're in such a bad position, because if they had been financially solvent and then the Renova thing and whatever had happened, then potentially they would still be able to run and not axe everybody immediately. But if things haven't really been going so well, I understand probably cutting most of the people that are involved with creating new content and just having enough people to maintain the servers going forward. Are you muted? They said they can't hear you.
Yes, I was muted. I was just saying, other than I guess the only thing I would say is he is. I do think he seems to be on paper the owner, but that doesn't mean he didn't have other people helping him financially. So that's where I think Columbus Nova could come in. It does look like. I mean, you look at the tax forms. It's a what was it called? Inception Acquisition that Daybreak has said that as his company. And it's the same thing. They also said Columbus Nova was not part of Renova. Well, I think that actually on paper will probably look that way, that they were a part of it. They were associated with it. Maybe they weren't necessarily, quote, owned by them, but, financially they were tied to them. So, I think it's a very fine line as far as words. They are probably going to be able to say he was the owner and show us that he was, but that I don't think is probably the whole story.
Well, I guess the question is it the difference between Daybreak just being shut down full stop or having to run on their residual finances until being purchased or shutting down otherwise? That's kind of what I'm wondering with this, is making this full clean break to make sure that it's not shown that they're directly part of Columbus Nova right now might be the only thing that stopped them from just like having the doors shuttered by the government today.
The only other thing I guess that I was told that I've not mentioned is when all of this was kind of brought up on Monday and Tuesday, there was a very real possibility that, and this hasn't happened yet, so I don't know if it will, but there was a very real possibility if they don't sell that H1Z1 and DCUO might be the only two games left open in any period of time coming up. Again, that's just take it for what you will. We haven't even really talked about that also Sony is 10% owner too, which was like, what? What? And that actually appears to strangely be in 2017 that occurred. I have no idea why, but anyways. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about, so I didn't want to focus on just Daybreak. I just was curious everyone's opinion. And it's a big deal because it could, I think, detract from the grander scheme of why we're here. So,
Yeah, it's a
Well,
huge
and again,
deal.
and again, Stephen has said he can't comment on what's going on, which makes it sound like he's somewhere there on the radar potentially. And again, he's got so many devs from Daybreak working for him already. I would not be surprised to see some more popping up, which hopefully would be a good thing.
So, next thing is sieges. This is something we had started to talk about. It was sort of intertwined with communication as well. I watched the last 10 minutes of our show last time. And I know, Diggs, you had wanted to also, again, talk about sieges. Stephen was on From the Ashes, right?
Yeah, From the Ashes, episode 42.
And you had just kind of pointed out something, your interest in sieges. So I'm going to actually let you take it and sort of what new information there was. I've not been able to watch that, so I'm in the dark. So.
For people who aren't familiar with me, number one, I'm a pretty much old school tabletop D&D RPG player. So my preference for RPGs is to play them cooperatively with the group versus NPCs. In MMORPGs, I'm typically a casual PvPer, so I like to do defenses of cities for a while, and one of my pet peeves is the cooldown on the PvP flag, because I really only want to participate in PvP for about an hour per day, and I play for probably 6 to 10 to 12 hours per day, and I don't like getting jumped while I'm waiting for that cooldown to cool down. I'm harvesting off in some corner and somebody finds me and jumps me, and I'm not in the mood for PvP. The nice thing, I think, for PvPers in my mind is that there are many paths to PvP combat without having to deal with the corruption mechanic. And of those, we have, what do we have? We have caravan runs, we have castle sieges, we have node sieges, we have guild versus guild warfare, and we have arenas. So Stephen, on this past Sunday, during an interview with From the Ashes, episode 42, he gave us some more details about castle defense, which I thought was really cool. So the way it works is that the siege of the castle, which is really guild versus guild warfare, only guilds can participate and own these castles. There's 5 castles per server, and whoever owns the castle is able to influence somehow the region which surrounds the castle.
Taxes and things like that.
Yeah, and some other stuff, but we don't know exactly what the details are. But each castle has 3 nodes associated with it, which can be built up to the village stage. You have 1 week per node to do that, and you do that by having your caravans escort the needed resources to fortify the defenses. So week 1 is going to be node A, week 2 will be node B, week 3 will be node C, and then week 4 is the actual siege. And if the caravan fails and that village does not get fortified, the siege will be much weaker because it doesn't have all the defenses that it needs. So what I really like about that is that gives PvPers something to do. Potentially every time they log in, they can go seek out, is there a caravan run going on right now? And there likely will be. And you get to go and, kill some people and try and prevent or defend the caravan. And you have something to do that's PvP oriented. Probably every time you log in. It might not be the whole time you're logged in. But probably you can find some PvP to do without having to deal with the corruption system. Now, for those who don't know, the corruption system is that there are 3 flag states. There's green for combatant, purple for non-combatant, red for corrupted. If everybody starts off green as a non-combatant, you flag as purple combatant as soon as you attack another player. If a combatant kills a non-combatant because they chose not to fight back, the attacker will turn red and will be corrupted. Green gets normal death penalty if you die while you're green. If you die while you're purple, you get half the death penalty. And if you die when you're red, you get at least 2 times the death penalty, but that's dependent on how many greens you kill and how high your corruption score is. And if you die when red and you have a high corruption score, you might risk your gear breaking in addition to the resources that you lose. So it's great that we have all these other avenues for PvP that doesn't cause you to risk becoming corrupted. If you are participating in caravan or node sieges or castle sieges, or you're in a guild versus guild warfare, which has objectives, which have victory or loss parameters, then you don't have to deal with corruption. And so I loved, again, just getting those details because it seems like people will have something to do throughout the week. You don't have to just wait.
I think at the same time, we got information that would suggest that if what you wanted to be doing was attacking caravans, that if you didn't have prior knowledge of a caravan leaving at a certain time or being in a certain place, that it would be very difficult to find. So if you were so actively seeking out attacking caravans is intentionally difficult. So,
well, I think that's especially true of node sieges for node caravans coming from nodes, but I think caravans coming to and from the castles is going to be a little bit more evident. But, the players can dictate the paths of the caravan runs to some extent. So that's part of what's going to make that difficult. I am curious to know whether or not people who want to focus on that, maybe there's a class like Ranger class or something like that that can focus on tracking stuff like that. But
yeah, I just the little bit that I read was suggesting that, like, if you didn't want, in order to avoid people just camping routes, was the context of the discussion. And because with all of that, we could say, we know that something is coming from this village to the castle, and we know that that's what they have to do all week. So our guild's stronger. We're just gonna live in between those.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like large scale griefing, right? It's interesting, but what I think is cool about it is the non-engaged part, where you can contribute to a war effort without going out and needing to smack somebody, right? Like, it's that sense that there's a chance that I can log in, because my issue is, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, because Stephen, in that episode you were talking about, he said he told a story about in Lineage 2 when he was PvPing for 8 hours. And see, I can't get caught up in something that we lose because I have to log out. Right, or I have to walk away. I can't do that. But you know what I can do? I can log in and I can go collect timber and furs and talk to people and, just wander around the village chatting or whatever for a little while and have a good time while contributing and not feeling like I'm stuck.
Right.
And I have positive memories of those times too, of like being stuck and staying up for hours and hours, or getting a phone call at 3:00 in the morning from my guild saying, you need to get online because we need you right now. And I was super happy about that, but I can never do that again.
Right.
So I like that I could be a passive contributor or, peripheral contributor to the overall effort.
Yeah. And I prefer that anyway. Like I said, I'm a pacifist, so I like stuff like in Neverwinter Online where you have objectives that are not directly killing the other players, but you have to fortify positions or you have to build the catapults in a certain amount of time, protect them from being destroyed and things like that. And although I don't completely hate the combat, I'm only interested in hardcore combat for about an hour, and after that, I'd rather go focus on something else. And if that focus could be, like you said, gathering the resources, maybe even protecting the caravan, or building. I don't know how we're going to go about actually building the catapults, but whatever that entails, that could potentially be a lot of fun. But I think go ahead.
I was going to say, it's one of the other nice things about being able to contribute to greater things that are going on, and resources actually mattering. That if you do a short session, you only have 15-20 minutes to play. You go out, you chop some trees, you kill some wolves, get their fur, get some meat, go fishing for a few minutes, whatever. Bring your supplies back, sell some, drop off some to your guild, keep some. That's actually a productive session. And then beyond that, the idea that you don't have to go to the depths of the darkest and highest level of dungeons and forests to get the resources and minerals and wood and other things that you actually need to do things. But those things are just right out the gate. That again supports short session players, specifically because there's not this impetus to go on a grand adventure just to get resources that are actually worthwhile and relevant to people. They're right outside the door. Go get them. We need them. People need that stuff. And if you get good at it, maybe people will want to bring you on an expedition to where there is some nicer wood, so you can help either harvest it better, more efficiently, use higher technique, use their higher quality equipment with your higher technique, whatever. So that can be for your longer sessions when you actually do have a chance to play for 2 or 3 hours. But I think that's the sort of thing that we really don't get to see a lot of in the conventional static MMO, is the trees and the creatures outside the town doors. Especially because they're all static towns and they aren't, really spread out they're in difficulty-based regions, but still, it always feels like whatever's outside the door in an MMO is usually the crap resource, and you're only going to be able to use it right when you get to the zone. Then beyond that, it's useless. That all completely goes away, and it's something I'm really happy about. That you go and get wood and someone can actually make something functional out of it. Who knows, that wood might have been used to make the door that was built into the sewers by a carpenter trying to get their skill up, that ends up keeping out the rats that would have actually led to some sort of horrible infestation. So consequences happen from actually doing things too, and that's also exciting. Anyway, I'm done ranting on this subject here.
Well, so I hope another influence, when we're progressing the nodes, the racial flavor of the node will change based on who the dominant number of people of a race are in that location. So it would be cool if that's happening with the castles too, if it's influencing nearby NPCs, and the interest of those NPCs are changing. I don't know. So I know that the nodes associated with the castles are all the village nodes, the 3, are always going to be military nodes, but I don't know if there's a way to influence, more scientific or more economic or more divine in that region that can also be influenced by the guild and what their interests are. But one of the things that Stephen mentioned is that to take over the castle, it's going to require like a long cast ability that takes about 5 minutes for the guild leader to cast, and it's the guild leader and or like a deputy leader. So it's going to take a while to take over the castle. But that also has me thinking about what I'm really hoping to see. We know that groups of summoners can cast one big, massive golem, can create one big, massive golem. So it would be really cool if that could be part of your castle defense, is groups of summoners working together to summon something big, or groups of mages working to fortify a certain defense, that kind of thing. What can the classes do to work together, to use their abilities together to do something instead of us always doing something individually?
Right.
It's the Fantastic Four thing, right? Like, so whenever they go, for people who don't know, like, I'm a Fantastic Four fan, and but basically against their strongest enemies, their victory always comes down to how their individual powers can work well together and how they could use them as a team. So, like the Invisible Woman can create those shields, and Johnny's adding fire within it, and in the meantime, the Thing is holding up a wall to keep whatever it is from hurting them, and Mr. Fantastic is being fantastic. But like that kind of thing that we already heard about. They're not planning on balancing classes for one-on-one, but instead looking at rock, paper, scissors type advantages. So along with that comes there should be emergent ways for people to work together like that, whether it's fully designed in or not. That the rock, paper, scissors advantage tree naturally creates opportunities for people to work together like that.
Yeah, so last time, 2 weeks ago, I was in a discussion about on a thread about tanks, and in a debate about whether or not the Guardian, which is a tank primary class, tank primary archetype, and tank secondary archetype. Somebody described that as the super tank, and that should always be the main tank in the top end raids. And I was saying that should not be the case. Any tank should be able to be, any tank subclass should be able to act as main tank. But then you're going to want to shore up what they're doing with your other classes. So if I've got a tank mage or a tank cleric, maybe I want to have a cleric tank that is compensating for my my primary tank not taking the secondary tank. Maybe that cleric taking the secondary tank can shore up that part. So it becomes more about how your group of individuals work together to decide how to compensate the weaknesses of the primary characters or your powerful characters. So that's it's not always cookie cutter. I mean, if cookie cutter people want to do it, but it should not be that you can't win this raid because you didn't bring a tank. There should be a way to defeat it.
That's actually something I was thinking about is, no, tank is the perfect tank you bring if it's going to be a single enemy who's physical damage banging on one person, because that's what the tank's all about. But if they're using magic, there's tanks that are more specifically adept to being a magic tank. And I'm thinking if you bring tank, he's going to get cooked. So you need to, bring a diversity of tanks. That was actually one of the things I remember from Vanilla WoW was towards some of the later content. I was playing a shaman. I was spec for resistance for really every type. And a lot of times I would end up being the sixth tank just because it was easy for me to grab aggro late in the battle. And, I was able to resist the elemental damage instead of having to deal with the physical damage. So most bosses did a combination of physical and elemental. So yeah, that definitely is something that I would expect to see is tank the Guardian is probably really, really good for certain things, but to say it's the best for everything, no. There's probably encounters specifically designed to just destroy it.
Yeah, but if you bring like somebody who is a tank rogue, and that's your main tank, and then you have 5 other people in the raid who have tank as their secondary class, they should be able to make up for the fact that your main tank doesn't have tank as the secondary class. I mean, it should be your group figuring out how they like to play together versus everything being developed around.
It needs to be
around one cookie cutter configuration.
It's a sum of parts, not a select, not a recipe. In that, where like whatever your finished product is needs to be able to do all of the things required for that encounter, not I need to slot in A, B, and C. And the World of Warcraft example is actually great for it, because like even in Burning Crusade, like the Illidan fight, most guilds defeated that encounter by using a Warlock HP tank to soak magic. In Karazhan, it was very common to have a Warlock or a Druid soaking some of the like secondary effects of things. And there were different ways of doing it because it was about a sum of parts. I don't know what modern Warcraft raid content is like, but like Neuro brought it up, and there are a lot of good fights, good boss fights, but we're not necessarily talking about that because we're talking about PvP, where the sum of your parts needs to be, do I have a balanced a balanced force, right? Like, so if you want to take tank is probably the worst PvP thing that you can do, because you don't have you're setting yourself up for the rock paper scissors too well, unless you have a wingman that can be right with you all the time. So unless you are just bait, right? Which is
stand
fine.
in a doorway and be wide.
Yeah, you stand there, and in that point, you may want, like, you would need to take that holy trinity of, you would need to have tank, damage, heal together in order to be effective at all. Where in other various parts of the battle, it might be you may want to balance that differently. You may want to have several tanky damagers and several tanky healers or whatever, and move that around so that, and then as the battle is changing and as different things are happening, you're going to want to switch that up. You're going to say, hey, look, over here they've caught on to us having stupid tank that just gets cooked in his armor. So, but if we threw you into this little skirmish over there, it would totally tip the tide because they don't have a solution to that, and we're ready to back you up and push forward. So it becomes about being reactive and understanding all of your pieces and using all of them well.
Yeah, when I played Wizard 101, I was actually taught how to fight from a premier PvP group, and it's like a card. It's like a card game. So the winning strategy, is really knowing what the abilities of each class are and how to the strengths and weaknesses, but knowing how to maximize the strengths of your group mates and how to maximize the weaknesses of your opponents, and to be able to anticipate, well, if they're going to use that ability, I'm going to use this ability, especially among my group mates. So when I was out in pickup groups, it didn't matter who was with me. I still knew how to support that class. If they're going to play that ability, I'm going to play this ability, and I hope that's what happens in our groups and raids, especially those that battle often together, that we learn how each individual likes to play and what abilities they're likely to use, and then we can sync off of their stuff. If somebody loves to use ice, maybe I also want to focus on ice so we can stack those attacks. And it's not so much about, it has to be a tank, but if it's a tank mage who likes to offset their tanking with ice powers, I'm going to maximize those ice powers too. I hope that happens, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is that this is large-scale PvP that we're mostly talking about. So whatever role you choose to have, if it's not working with your team, and if your team can't work with that, then it's a total waste, right? It's not solving a riddle like a boss fight. It's like a traditional MMORPG boss fight is solving a riddle, which means going and dying a whole bunch of times until you figure out what the mechanics are, and with trial and error, and then doing the dance, right? Yeah. That's what it is. But in a large-scale PvP scenario, it becomes about getting the right people with the right attributes and skills in the right places. And Neuro probably has the most experience with that from PlanetSide 2, which actually did it well. Like, you needed to have a variety of different people on each front, and you needed to balance that correctly, and you needed to think about, like, do we need to be taking vehicles? Do we need to be taking all this other stuff?
I hate to say it, but honestly, PlanetSide 1 did it way better because there are less people and there's a lot more importance on using the entire continent at once. Yeah, like PlanetSide 1, I feel like did it way better, but you're right. Like, it definitely mattered. It mattered a lot. What equipment you brought, what you were going to do, pulling 20 people from the front line to the next closest tower so you could all get maxes, getting your big armor suits. And then, with the purple peoples, the Bonded Sovereignty, you were able to use jetpacks on your big heavy armor units, so you could get to the second level of things and just do really, really dynamic base assaults that the other factions weren't able to do. And that was one of the things, it's the risk reward. You have to pull 20 people off to do that. And during that time, you're probably losing progress on the front lines. So it's really a risk reward. How are you going to be able to pull that off? Well, it helps to, prepare for it. Start lining the hallways with people with spam weapons. Just get everyone lined up in such a way that you can stand your ground and not lose any ground during that period of time. And ultimately, if you're able to pull it off, you're able to take that base so much quicker. I mean, that often would be the thing that just wins it. So that's the sort of thing, I'm really hoping to see with Ashes and its PvP, that the level of, taking a couple minutes to plan and going out as a group is going to be, so much more heavily emphasized than Zerg style respawn, rush into combat, and die. That, I hate seeing that. I really do. And so many games it devolves into that. And that's with the emphasis on working with other people and being able to synergize with their powers. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they deal with that. I'm hoping they do like a timer-based wave spawn. So everybody spawns at the same, 30-second or 1 minute interval, kind of like a console shooter, just so that way when you come out of the hole, you're coming out with a few of your buddies and you can at least just tag along with them and make a makeshift squad, rather than respawning when you respawn and just, what do I do?
Yeah, one of the competing objectives is that there's a way to destroy certain fortifications on either side that will increase or decrease the spawn rate of your enemy. So if you destroy certain objectives, that's going to increase your spawn rate. But thinking about sieges again specifically, I also wonder if part of the strategy will be learning what's the best way to defeat a scientific node. What in terms of what you're bringing, what kind of siege equipment you're bringing, what's best for a scientific node. Is that the same thing for a divine node or for an economic node? And then is the same true of the races? Is there a way to anticipate the weaknesses of the race that's controlling that node and prepare for that? Can you learn the defense mechanics of that node or city after multiple attempts at sieging that city?
Along with that, one of the things I don't know about the design of this game is, will the layouts be static? Like the biggest defending a city starts with the way that you design the roads. It starts with how the access points. So Neuro's talking about things devolving into zerging, but people solved the problem of zerging millennia ago by forcing people into a narrow ravine where they're outgunned, or creating a situation where people get inside the walls, but there are a lot of zigzagging streets and a lot of flat top buildings with archers posted. So, okay, you get in, so now you're going to try to storm the castle, which means that you're running through streets where you're getting just shot at from on top of those, and different layers of backing up. So every time, the answer had to be, well, how do we get through there? What kind of technological advancement or what kind of different strategy do we need to use to solve the technological or strategic advantage that they have? Because zerging, it just stopped. Like it stopped until tanks and blitzkrieg airstrikes, right? Like that was like the return of the Zerg, like, because there were the problem was solved. So that problem needs to be solved in the game. If all of the nodes have the same layout and the same design, and all the castles have the same layout and the same design, then the biggest tool we have to defend and the biggest tool we have to attack by picking apart defenses is gone, because it just comes down to we're playing the meta. We're playing it's just like we're playing League of Legends. Like there would very quickly be a laning phase and a group phase, whatever the equivalent is. But if we can't direct the flow of people and react to how they want us to direct the flow on the attacking side, then that's how sieges work, right? That's how, a siege is really a standoff, because there are a bunch of people behind walls saying, if you come closer, we'll kill you. And there are a bunch of people outside of the walls saying, well, if you come out, we'll kill you. So we're going to stay here until you starve, right? Like, that's how good technologically it became. That the only way to beat it from the attacking side was, well, we poison the river, or we just let them starve and wait till they come out all emaciated. But that kind of technological advantage, one way or another, needs to be there, or it'll just be zerking, right? It'll be who can bring the most people or who can have the most uptime, or instead, it should be about creating the better defenses, forcing people into an attack pattern, hoping that they don't solve the problem. It needs to be something like that, or it's just going to be a Zerg mess.
Yeah, it's reminding me of Fortnite, because I can actually now imagine all the little tricks and pathing ways and Zergs of enemies running in and running over my traps and stuff. But so the layout should not be all the same. It should be somewhat different based on the racial makeup. It's probably going to be somewhat different based on whether it's a divine, economic, and the other types of nodes. But also players get to decide which buildings are built. And so that's going to have an effect too. I don't know if it'll have as much of a strategic effect in terms of pathing for sieges, but it is going to make the layout somewhat different if you have a temple versus having a library or a thieves guild or whatever. And then, as the nodes become metropolises and all that stuff, those are taking over other nearby nodes. So I think that's going to be kind of interesting too. But yeah, we'll have to see how much control we have over those layouts, especially when it comes to trying to path people through once people get through. That could be really interesting.
Yeah, I'd just like it to be, instead of, a few months in, there's a strategy for how you attack every kind of node that you can just look up on a website, and everyone's putting up their guide to it, and every guild's posting videos about how they attack.
Well, because everybody will be posting their videos, so,
Well, they all will be.
Right.
But instead, what I would like to see is, I would like people to say, this is what it's like when I'm attacking Diggs' guild.
Yeah.
Not, this is what it's like when I'm attacking a scientific village node.
Yeah.
And then you can react to that. So the next time that you're preparing, and then the next downtime, you know that you're part of the government of, you can change it differently. So every single time it's a little bit different, and it becomes this like evolving strategic plan. And it may come down to being very standardized. Please don't eat that. But there needs to be some variation, or it'll be standardized very quickly. It'll come down to who has the most people that can show up online and or stay online during that time.
Yeah, and hopefully things like the social organizations that people focus on, the religious, the different religions that a city chooses to worship, hopefully all those things can change up the cookie cutter possibilities to tweak those things. I mean, it could even be different leaders. Maybe different leaders want a different religion, and that causes how the protection of the city changes. So.
We haven't heard from Phantom X in a while.
I'm just enjoying the conversation. That's all.
Yep.
All right.
Now, Phantom, are you planning to what are you planning to do besides farming in the game? All I know is that you're thinking of focusing on farming and maybe animal husbandry.
I mean, I plan combat too, but it's. I mean, we've talked about it, but I've long wanted a game where I could choose to just be sort of, I don't know if a passive player is the right word, but be a part of the world, but not have to be planning a raid once a week or, that sort of thing. So that really sort of intrigues me, but I also have that option. So, the idea of having, I mean, I'll participate in that. I mean, I'm not just going to be checking in on a farm. I mean, that'll probably be 75% of what I do, I hope. But, I will partake in the sieges and things. I think that sounds very interesting, or somehow be a part of it. I don't know that I'll be storming the castle or anything, but maybe I help build some of the siege machines or whatever it might be. That's sort of where I see. Now that could change, but that's where I see myself playing mostly. So,
yeah, if I could just go out on group mining expeditions and cart stuff back, maybe someplace that maybe a little bit of danger involved, but if that were my role in the game, I'd be happy to log in for a little bit, and knowing that at any time I could switch to doing something different if I wanted. See, it can't just be that, or then I'm playing Sea of Thieves, right? Which is literally doing the same thing over and over and over again. But it's fun. The mechanics of doing it are fun. So you take 4 people out on a ship, you sail to an island, you search for a treasure. If you get attacked, you attempt to fight people off. That kind of thing it's a lot of fun. And I would love to just be in a larger scale world where I'm doing basically the same thing with, it's a mining expedition, or it's a bear hunt or whatever. And the goal is to bring it back and contribute to the node or the castle or whatever we're doing at that time. But if instead I just want to come in and be part of the planning, or just socialize, or just explore for a bit, or maybe even take part in the battle, then I have that extra level where it becomes a whole package game, instead of Sea of Thieves has that one piece of the expedition done very well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's not even sieges, but maybe one day I decide whatever I'm trying to ship somewhere is actually, I want to join along the caravan, just being able to do that. But the idea of, I think of World of Warcraft, everyone can craft, you don't really have a chance to be the crafter, right? In the past you did. Vanilla, sure, there were certain enchanting recipes that very few people had. You'd have to wait till they logged on to be able to get that expertise. That doesn't really exist in anything else. I mean, so the idea of being able to actually just log in, still have to interact with other people, because I probably wouldn't be going out and getting all the resources myself, but somehow set up that sort of social network, and just specialize, be the person. I think they mentioned mounts, be the person that breeds horses that people come to because they know they're going to be able to get some really nice mount for you. That to me, that's a whole nother area of a MMORPG that really doesn't exist anywhere else, where you're actually playing a part in the world.
I mean, it's cool because we can become those NPCs that we normally go to. I want this really cool horse. I'm going to go find Phantom X. I want to get this sword made, so I know Tsog has mined the special ore that I need, and he's gonna, I'll be able to get that from him and take it to the blacksmith and say, here's the stuff you need to make my gear. And we should know, because it's open world housing, we should know when Phantom is gonna be on doing his thing, and we should know when Tsog is gonna be doing his thing. Maybe he has a shop set up where he's selling his ore. And we go hang out at his shop for a while. One cool thing that they mentioned, that Steven mentioned, I think it was last week too, was that with players who have taverns, you'll be able to progress your tavern as well. It might be that you're cooking level 1 food that will help buff people, but you also have at your tavern access to level 1 quests or tasks or rumors, and then as that levels up, higher level people will frequent your tavern to find out about higher level quests or get higher level buffs. And again, we won't just be running to NPCs that have exclamation points over their head. We'll be running to Phantom's tavern or Tsog's shop and trying to get our information there. So that will be cool. Well,
I mean, you put it in a good way. I'm not, it's not like World of Warcraft where I'm taking a 4 or 6 weeks to grind rep to be able to reach the NPC that sells the mount I want. I'm actually becoming that. I'm taking that 4 or 6 weeks or however long to become that NPC that can create that mount that other people come to get. And you mentioned being alert. They've talked a little bit about, I think, some maybe mobile applications or some other way to sort of incorporate the game. It'd be really neat if you did have well-known crafters or people at taverns where you could actually have an app that you set it up somehow to be notified when that user opened up shop or when they were online to be asked for. That could be kind of a pretty neat integration that I would assume wouldn't be too difficult to do. Just an idea.
And especially if you could communicate on your mobile to set up the times for that, right? I'm at work and I see that you're at your shop, but I can say, hey, what time will you be? I'm hoping to log in at this time. Will you be there? That could be a cool thing too, just setting up meeting times.
Yeah, I mean, it'd just be. It'd solve a lot of. I can remember just World of Warcraft. There was, I forget the guy's name, but there was one, and I mentioned the enchanter because there was one enchanter that had this enchant, and you had to just log on and hope that you found this person at the right time. It'd just be really neat if you knew they logged on. Now I could, but that's where I what I find more, because we have raids. Yeah, they're going to add sieges and things like that. That'll be pretty cool. But Warhammer had massive online battles too. I mean, I'm more interested in the how else can I be a part of the world and contribute in a way that's not on a raid schedule or a dungeon schedule or some sort of punching the same button to kill something over and over and over again. And that's where I see myself more.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
well, I think we are. Well, let me check here. Now that I finally built a bot that can do this, although I see you, Neuro, just did the uptime command. Yeah, so we've been a little over an hour now. So I guess this is going to be the end for tonight. So we will be back in 2 weeks, and maybe sooner, I guess. But we're going to be scheduled by 2 weeks, so we'll
2 weeks.
Yeah. Hopefully, we do not have to talk about an acquisition of Daybreak in 2 weeks, but we'll see. But there'll be plenty more to discuss. So, everyone, thanks for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.